Part 1. The Beginning of Doubt. I never imagined that one day, my life would shatter into pieces. Emily and I had been married for almost a decade. She was 32, and I was 37. Our life together seemed perfect, at least on the surface. We had met at a mutual friend's barbecue, and her laugh had been the first thing that caught my attention. It was light, melodic, and genuine. It pulled me in, and from that moment, I was hers. We built a life filled with love, laughter, and trust, or so I thought. Emily was everything I ever wanted in a partner. Beautiful, intelligent, and fiercely ambitious. She worked at a high-end marketing firm, rising through the ranks faster than anyone else. Her boss, Michael, was a charismatic man, always charming at office parties. I never thought much of him, not until everything changed. The first seed of doubt was planted on a cold Wednesday evening. Emily had called to say she'd be late again. It was the third time that week. "We're working on a big project," she said, her voice rushed. "I won't be home until late. Don't wait up." I tried to brush it off. She had always been dedicated to her career, and I admired that about her. But something felt off. There was a new distance between us. Her eyes didn't light up the way they used to when she looked at me, and her laughter seemed hollow, rehearsed. One night, as she slept soundly beside me, her phone buzzed. The screen lit up, and a name appeared, Michael. My heart raced, a cold sweat breaking across my brow. I knew I shouldn't invade her privacy, but curiosity got the better of me. The message read, "Last night was unforgettable. Can't wait to see you again." My world stopped. I stared at the message, my mind spiraling into a dark abyss. My hands shook, and I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I looked at her, lying peacefully, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I played the role of the loving husband, pretending everything was fine while my mind raced with questions. Was it just an innocent message? Was I overthinking it? But deep down, I knew. I knew something was wrong. The next few days were torture. Every smile she gave me felt fake, every laugh rehearsed. I became hyper-aware of everything, her movements, her phone habits, the way she'd casually mention Michael's name in conversation. I started piecing together moments that seemed insignificant before, the late nights, the unexplained business trips, the sudden need for privacy. I decided to follow her one evening. I hated myself for it, but I needed to know. I watched from my car as she walked into a fancy restaurant. My heart sank when I saw Michael join her at the table. They were laughing, leaning in close, their hands brushing. The way she looked at him, she had stopped looking at me like that a long time ago. I felt a knot tighten in my chest, my vision blurring with rage and betrayal. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. How long had this been going on? How many times had she lied to me, looking me in the eyes and pretending everything was okay? I drove home that night, my mind racing. I knew I had to confront her, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. I needed a plan. I needed to make her feel the pain she had caused me. She had shattered my world, and I was going to do the same to hers. I smiled, a bitter, hollow smile as I realized the power I held. I could destroy her life, just as she had destroyed mine. But first, I needed to play the part of the clueless husband. She wouldn't see it coming. She wouldn't know until it was too late. I went to bed that night, my heart heavy, my mind racing with schemes and revenge. I was going to make her suffer, to break her spirit piece by piece. And when she was at her lowest, when she was begging for forgiveness, I would disappear, leaving her to pick up the shattered remains of her life. She thought she could betray me and get away with it. She had no idea who she was dealing with. Part 2. The Unraveling. The days that followed were a blur. I moved through life like a ghost, pretending to be the husband she thought she knew. But inside, I was rotting, consumed by anger and betrayal. Each time she smiled at me, each time she kissed me goodnight, I fought the urge to confront her, to shout the truth in her face. But I couldn't, not yet. I needed her to believe that nothing had changed. I needed her to think I was oblivious, that I was still the loving, trusting husband she could fool so easily. It was hard. Every time she left the house, I wondered if she was running to him. Every time her phone buzzed, I fought the urge to snatch it from her hands. I started digging. Late at night, while she slept peacefully beside me, I searched through her phone. She was careful, too careful. There were no suspicious messages, no late-night calls. But her calendar told me everything I needed to know. There were meetings and work dinners scheduled on days she had never mentioned. I noted each one, my suspicions growing. Then, one Friday evening, she came home later than usual. Her hair was messy, her makeup slightly smudged. She looked surprised to see me awake. "I thought you'd be asleep by now," she said, her voice casual. But her eyes were different. There was guilt behind them, just for a moment before she looked away. I forced a smile, pretending I hadn't noticed. I couldn't sleep. How was work? I asked, keeping my voice steady. She hesitated, just for a second. Busy. We're wrapping up the project, so everyone stayed late. She kissed my forehead, her lips cold against my skin. I'm exhausted. I'm going to take a shower. I watched her walk away, my heart pounding. She was getting bolder, more confident in her lies. She thought she had me fooled. The next day, I decided to follow her again. I left the house early, pretending to run errands. I watched from my car as she left, dressed sharply in a blouse and skirt that hugged her figure perfectly. My chest tightened, jealousy burning inside me. She used to dress like that for me. I followed her downtown, keeping my distance. She parked outside a hotel. My heart sank. I watched as she walked inside, her head held high, her movements graceful and confident. She didn't look around, didn't hesitate. She knew exactly where she was going. I waited for almost an hour before she came out. Michael was with her. They were laughing, his hand resting casually on her lower back. My hands trembled as I snapped pictures, documenting every second. I felt sick watching them, the way she looked at him, the way she leaned into his touch. I wanted to confront them right there, to rip him apart and demand answers. But I held back. This wasn't just about confronting her. It was about making her pay. I spent the next few days gathering evidence. I hired a private investigator to follow her, to confirm what I already knew. It didn't take long. Pictures of them at fancy restaurants, walking hand in hand at the park, even a weekend trip to a nearby lake. It was all there, printed in black and white. I kept the photos hidden, buried deep in my closet where she'd never find them. Each night, I looked at them, memorizing every detail, fueling my anger. I imagined her lies, the excuses she must have made to spend those nights with him. I wondered if she thought about me at all. Did she feel guilty? Or was she too wrapped up in her fantasy to care? But I didn't confront her. I played my role perfectly, pretending to be the loving, clueless husband. I brought her flowers, cooked her dinner, kissed her goodnight. I watched as her eyes softened, her guard lowering. She thought she was safe. She thought I was oblivious. But I was planning my revenge. I was going to destroy her, piece by piece, the way she had destroyed me. She had built her life on lies, and I was going to tear it all down. I started by isolating her. I was subtle about it. I became more affectionate, more attentive. I suggested we spend more time together, that we needed to reconnect. She seemed relieved, even grateful. She started canceling plans with her friends, spending more evenings at home. I watched as her world slowly shrank, as she became more dependent on me. I made sure to mention Michael often, asking about her day at work, showing interest in her projects. I watched her closely, waiting for the flicker of guilt in her eyes. Sometimes it was there, but she hid it well, masking it with practiced smiles and laughter. I wondered how long she could keep up the charade. How long before her lies started to unravel? I began planting seeds of doubt. I'd mentioned stories of infidelity at work, casually asking how people could betray their partners so easily. She would tense up, her smile faltering, but she always recovered, brushing it off with a laugh. I could never do that to you, she'd say, her eyes wide with innocence. I wanted to scream at her, to throw the photos in her face and watch her crumble. But I held back, biding my time. I needed her to fall apart on her own, to watch her life unravel as her lies caught up with her. I was patient. I was calculated. And I was ready to watch her suffer. Part 3. The breaking point. The more I watched her, the more I realized how easily she lied. It was almost second nature to her, the way she smiled and laughed, weaving stories to cover her tracks. I wondered if she ever truly loved me, or if it was all just part of her performance. I became obsessed with her deception, replaying every conversation in my mind, dissecting every word. I started noticing the little things, how she'd glance at her phone and quickly look away, how her laugh seemed forced when she mentioned work. It made me sick. How long had she been living this double life? The investigator continued to send me updates. Pictures of them together, texts she thought she had deleted, even recordings of their conversations. I listened to her voice, sweet and playful, so different from the way she spoke to me. She was living two separate lives, and she was masterful at it. I started to question everything. Every memory, every moment we shared, it all felt tainted. Had she been lying to me from the beginning? Was our marriage just another act? The doubts consumed me, filling me with rage and bitterness. I needed her to suffer. I needed her to feel the pain she had inflicted on me. But I couldn't just confront her. It was too easy, too quick. No, she needed to be broken, piece by piece. I started by sowing seeds of distrust at her work. It was easy, really. A few anonymous emails to HR, some fabricated rumors about her and Michael. Nothing too direct, just enough to raise suspicion. I watched as she became more stressed, more paranoid. She started checking her phone constantly, her smile fading as she read the messages. She became quieter at home, distracted. I asked her if everything was okay, pretending to be concerned. She looked at me, her eyes hollow, and said everything was fine. I almost laughed. She was crumbling, and she didn't even know why. I kept up the facade, playing the supportive husband. I'd bring her coffee while she worked late into the night, massaging her shoulders as she complained about the stress at the office. I watched her unravel, piece by piece, her confidence slipping away. But it wasn't enough. I wanted her to feel isolated, alone. I started distancing her from her friends. Whenever she made plans, I'd subtly manipulate the situation, making her feel guilty for leaving me at home. I became needier, more dependent. She canceled plans more frequently, choosing to stay home to support me. I watched as her world grew smaller, as she became more dependent on me. It was almost too easy. She didn't suspect a thing. She still thought she was in control, that she was the one living a double life. But the real breaking point came one evening when she received a call from Michael. She was in the kitchen, her voice low and urgent. "No, I can't. Not tonight." "Yes, he's home." "I don't know, maybe next week." She hung up quickly when she saw me standing in the doorway. Her face turned pale, her hands trembling slightly. "Who was that?" I asked, my voice calm. She forced a smile, tucking her hair behind her ear. "Oh, just someone from work. They needed help with a project." Her voice was steady, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. I stepped closer, watching her squirm under my gaze. "Must be an important project if they're calling you this late." I let the words hang in the air, watching as her face flushed with guilt. She laughed nervously, brushing it off. "Yeah, well, you know how demanding work can be." She turned away, busying herself with the dishes, her shoulders tense. I watched her, my chest tightening with anger. She was lying to my face, bold and unashamed. I wanted to grab her, to shake the truth out of her. But I held back, forcing a smile. "Yeah, I get it. Work can be demanding." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, confused and uneasy. I could feel her eyes on me as I went upstairs, her guilt hanging heavy in the air. That night, I listened to the recording from her phone. She had called Michael back after I left the kitchen. He almost caught me. "I know, I'll be more careful." "Yes, I miss you too." The rage boiled inside me, my fist clenching as I listened to her sweet, deceitful voice. She was a master manipulator, playing me like a fool, but not for much longer. I started planning my exit. I knew I couldn't stay with her, not after everything she'd done. But leaving her wasn't enough. I needed her to suffer, to feel the emptiness and betrayal she had inflicted on me. I began withdrawing money from our joint accounts, little by little, so she wouldn't notice. I changed my passwords, locked her out of my financials. I stopped paying the bills under her name, letting the debt pile up. I watched as she became more stressed, her frustration growing each day. "I don't understand why the credit card was declined," she complained one night, tossing the bill on the table. "I paid it last month." I shrugged, pretending to be confused. "That's strange. Maybe it's just a bank error. You should call them." I watched her grow more agitated, her confidence crumbling as her world spiraled out of control. She was losing everything, her career, her finances, her sense of stability. And she had no idea it was all my doing. I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, watching her struggle, knowing that this was only the beginning. She had destroyed me, shattered my trust, my heart. Now it was her turn to break. Part 4. The collapse. The cracks were starting to show. Emily was losing control, and she didn't know how to fix it. Her confidence was shattered, her usual composure replaced with anxiety and paranoia. It was beautiful to watch. She was becoming more distant, more distracted. I noticed the way her hands would tremble when she thought I wasn't looking, how her smile no longer reached her eyes. She was falling apart, and I was loving every second of it. I kept up my act, playing the concerned husband. "Is everything okay?" I'd ask, my voice dripping with feigned sympathy. "You seem stressed." She would force a smile, shaking her head. "Just work. It's been overwhelming lately." She was still lying, still pretending everything was fine. But I could see through her facade. I could see the guilt eating away at her. I continued my plan, slowly dismantling her life piece by piece. I isolated her from her friends, sabotaged her finances, and planted rumors at her job. She was spiraling, her world crumbling around her, and she had no idea I was behind it all. I watched as she started questioning herself, her confidence shaken. She became more dependent on me, clinging to the illusion of our marriage. She needed me, and I made sure she knew it. But it still wasn't enough. I needed her to break, to completely shatter. I needed her to feel the pain she had inflicted on me. I started planting doubts in her mind, subtle suggestions that made her question her own sanity. I'd move things around the house, small objects like keys and books. She'd spend hours searching, her frustration growing as she wondered how she could be so forgetful. "I swear I left my keys here," she mumbled one morning, frantically searching the kitchen counter. "I had them last night." I shrugged, pretending to be oblivious. "Maybe you left them at work?" I suggested, watching as she grew more anxious, her face pale with worry. I was slowly chipping away at her reality, making her question her own mind. It was cruel, but it was exactly what she deserved. One evening, she broke down in tears, her body trembling as she sobbed. "I don't know what's wrong with me," she cried, burying her face in her hands. "I feel like I'm losing my mind." I wrapped my arms around her, pretending to comfort her. "You're just stressed," I whispered, rubbing her back. "Everything will be okay." She clung to me, her fingers digging into my shoulders. I could feel her desperation, her fear. She was broken, vulnerable, completely at my mercy. But I wasn't done. I still needed to watch her fall even further. I decided to confront Michael. It was risky, but I needed to make sure he was out of the picture for good. I wanted to see the look on his face when he realized the damage he had caused. I waited for him outside his office one evening, watching as he left the building, his phone pressed to his ear. I knew he was talking to her. I had bugged her phone weeks ago. I followed him to his car, my heart pounding with adrenaline. He didn't see me coming. I grabbed him, shoving him against the side of his car, my fist colliding with his jaw. He stumbled, his phone dropping to the ground. "You think you can steal my wife and get away with it?" I snarled, my voice low and threatening. His eyes widened with fear, his hands trembling as he held them up in surrender. "I didn't know." "Shut up," I spat, my fists tightening. "You knew exactly what you were doing." I watched as his face turned pale, his confidence crumbling. He was nothing without his charm and charisma, just a coward hiding behind a facade. I leaned in close, my voice cold and steady. "You're going to leave her alone. You're going to disappear from her life, or I'll destroy yours." He nodded, his eyes wide with terror. Okay, I'll end it. I swear." I released him, watching as he stumbled back, his body shaking. He was pathetic, a weak little man who thought he could take what was mine. I left him there, bruised and humiliated. I knew he would end things with her. He didn't have the courage to face me again. That night, Emily was quieter than usual. She kept checking her phone, her expression growing more anxious as the hours passed. She was waiting for him to call, to text. But he wouldn't. Not anymore. She barely touched her dinner, her eyes distant. I watched her, a satisfied smile tugging at my lips. She was starting to realize that she was losing him. She just didn't know why. I went to bed that night feeling victorious, my heart racing with excitement. I was winning. I was tearing her world apart, and she was powerless to stop it. The next day, she was a wreck. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face pale and gaunt. She looked broken, exhausted, defeated. She was losing everything. Her career, her lover, her sanity. I kept up my act, pretending to be supportive, pretending to care. I watched as she fell apart, her lies catching up with her. She was paying the price for her betrayal, and I wasn't finished yet. I still had one more move to make, the final blow that would shatter her completely. It was time for her to learn the truth. It was time for her to see the monster she had created. I was going to leave her, but not before I watched her world burn. Part 5. The Endgame. The time had come. I had played my role perfectly, watching her unravel, feeding her paranoia and guilt until she was nothing more than a shell of the woman she used to be. It was almost too easy. She was fragile, vulnerable, and completely dependent on me. But I didn't want her dependence. I didn't want her love. I wanted her to suffer, to feel the emptiness and betrayal she had inflicted on me. And now, it was time for the final act. I started by packing my things, carefully and methodically, while she was at work. I took only what was mine, leaving behind the pieces of our shared life. The wedding photos, the anniversary gifts, the mementos of a love that was nothing but a lie. I left the envelope on the kitchen table, the manila folder thick with evidence of her betrayal. Photos of her with Michael, printouts of their text messages, recordings of their phone calls. Every sordid detail laid out before her, undeniable and damning. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. I wanted my absence to be the final blow, the crushing realization that she was truly alone. I walked out of that house without looking back, the door clicking shut behind me. It was over. I was free. I stayed at a hotel that night, knowing that she would come looking for me. I turned off my phone, blocking her number. I didn't want to hear her excuses, her pleas for forgiveness. She didn't deserve that closure. The next day, I went to my lawyer's office, filing for divorce. I wanted nothing from her, no money, no property. I just wanted to be done with her, to cut her out of my life like the cancer she was. I watched from my car as she came home that evening, her shoulders slumped, her face pale and exhausted. I could see the confusion in her eyes as she noticed my car missing, the lights off inside the house. I knew the moment she found the envelope. Her scream echoed through the neighborhood, raw and guttural, the sound of a soul shattering. It was beautiful. I watched as she collapsed to the floor, her body shaking with sobs, her hands clutching the photos, the evidence of her betrayal. She was broken, completely and utterly destroyed. She tried calling me, her number popping up on my screen over and over. I ignored each one, smiling as the messages poured in. Desperate pleas, frantic apologies, pathetic excuses. I didn't respond. I wanted her to feel the crushing weight of silence, the loneliness of knowing she had destroyed everything. Over the next few days, she spiraled further. She tried contacting my friends, my family, but they were all prepared. I had warned them, told them my side of the story. No one answered her calls. She was truly alone. I heard from mutual friends that she stopped showing up to work, that she looked gaunt and hollow, her once vibrant spirit completely extinguished. She had lost everything, her career, her lover, her husband. I thought I would feel satisfaction, that watching her suffer would bring me peace. But as the days passed, I felt nothing. Just an emptiness that gnawed at me, consuming me from the inside. I had won. I had destroyed her, just as she had destroyed me. But I was still haunted by the memories, the love I once felt for her. I hated her, but I also hated myself for still caring. I left the city, moving to a place where her ghost wouldn't follow me. I changed my number, deleted my social media, erased every trace of my past life. But no matter how far I ran, I couldn't escape the emptiness. Revenge had consumed me, defined me. And now that it was over, I didn't know who I was anymore. I thought about calling her, about hearing her voice one last time. But I stopped myself, knowing that reopening that wound would only prolong my suffering. I had to let her go. I had to let the past die. Months passed, and the pain dulled, fading into a distant ache. I rebuilt my life, slowly and carefully, learning how to live again. But every now and then, I'd catch myself thinking about her, wondering if she ever truly loved me. Wondering if I could have forgiven her, if I could have moved on without destroying her. I'll never know the answers to those questions. And maybe that's my punishment. Maybe that's the price of revenge, the endless cycle of pain and regret. I still see her sometimes, in my dreams. She's smiling, her eyes bright and full of love. The way she used to look at me, before the lies, before the betrayal. I wake up, my heart aching, the ghost of her touch lingering on my skin. I close my eyes and try to forget, but the memories never fade. I destroyed her life, but I destroyed mine too. I thought revenge would bring me peace, but all it brought was emptiness. I'm free of her, but I'm still trapped in the past, haunted by the love we once shared. I won. But in the end, I lost everything. The end.